Yes, I believe. I was looking at it, didn't seem to be like we needed to expedite everything on there. Right, like the law enforcement supplies. Yeah, that's where they have to buy those frame. This guy's sold. Where do they check? Right here, it's- It's not as okay. Seem like a lot. Yeah. Okay, it is June 7th at 5:45 PM. We're going to call this Finance Committee meeting to order. Present are council members Lang, Harris, Bub, Blake, and Marmee. First item on the agenda is a request for appropriation in the amount of $32,885.79.
This is just a payout. One employee was resigning and one employee was retiring.
Motion.
Second. Motion by Bub, second by Harris. Any questions and or discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, same sign. That motion passes 5-0. Next item on the agenda is a request for appropriation amount of $40,000.
This is for a to do what's called a risk and resilience study. This is a new requirement from Ohio EPA as part of our contingency plan for the water treatment plant. And we are getting some assistance from Arcadis in this group. Training and then assessing all of our water systems to see what all the problems would be and what we can do to reduce any of those risks. So this is working capital issue to Ohio EPA at the end of next month. So,
Okay.
Motion.
Second. Motion by Lang, second by Bub. Any questions and or discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, same sign. That motion passes 5-0. Thank you very much. Next item on the agenda is a request for appropriation amount of $37,800.
Yeah, sorry, that's for retirement of our tax administrator that will be ending 31 years of service next month. So it's for crew pay.
I have a motion by Bub, second by Lang. That's right.
Obviously Barb's done a great job. 30, what did you say, 31? It's great. Do we, I don't know if you're prepared to talk to this now. Do we have a succession plan? I'm assuming we do.
Yeah, the system tax administrator, which is Brenda Cooper, would fill with that position. And Brett will fall into the assistant's position. So they've been gearing for that for many months right now and kind of passing on those roles because there's a lot of different parts and pieces to that, a lot of responsibility, but it's been working well. And I've been interacting with them quite a bit here over the last few months. So.
And then will we be backfilling the role then vacated at the bottom of the rung?
Yeah, there should be an opening there. I would say at the end of the day for a revenue clerk too, they call it now. Revenue clerk too, that I think will probably be hired at that point. They haven't talked to that point yet. That's kind of up to Brenda, I think, a little bit. Obviously, she's going to carry on a good tradition, but it is her shop and we'll see what she wants to do or what direction she wants to move. So,
Thank you.
Any further questions and or discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, same sign. That motion passes 5-0. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Next item on the agenda is a request for appropriation of $24,110.
Good evening. This is in regards to one of our grants. So our grant cycle is on for 2 years. So the current grant cycle is going to end on June 30th, so the new one starts July 1st. This is pretty common. We typically don't budget for the second half of the year at the beginning of the year because we don't know if we're going to get the money. So we wait.
Motion by Lang, second by Bob. Any questions and or discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, same sign. That motion passes 5-0. Next item on the agenda is a request for appropriation in the amount of $175.
So this first one is a reimbursement from the offender who damaged one of our scram monitoring devices. They damaged the strap, so they paid us back. So we want to appropriate the money.
Second. Motion by Lang, second by Bob. Questions and or discussion? Seems like we go through a lot.
We do.
Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, same sign. That motion passes 5-0. Next item on the agenda is a request for appropriation amount of $11,500.
Mr. Chair, this is an appropriation made up of a couple different items. One of them, we had the SID Special Improvement District to pay for half of the poles being painted downtown Newark. The local poles being painted, they were rusty, they got painted black, they paid for half of them. And just as a footnote, I do have a request out to AEP for them to pay the other half. I'm waiting for response from them on that. The other part is an insurance refund. When we no longer use a piece of equipment, don't need to insure it anymore, we cancel it, we prepay our premium. So that is just a rebate. And the other part of this is AEP easements. You know, we've begun to charge AEP when they need an easement. And part of it, so we're asking for that to be appropriate.
Second. I have a motion by Lang, second by Harris. Any questions and or discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, same sign. That motion passes 5-0. Thank you very much. And with that, this finance committee meeting stands adjourned. Next up, I believe, is service.
What?
It does. That's what we're just saying. It's like bigger.
Okay, we'll call the service committee meeting to order. Those present are myself, Raph, Harris, Parker, Blake, and Bob. First first, we'll consider ordinance number 21-19. An ordinance annexing certain territory generally described as Horns Hill Road, located between the address of 1700 Horns Hill Road, parcel tax ID number 058-286682-01.000 and 058-286194-00.000, being 55.5 acres more or less located in Newark Township to the city of Newark, Ohio. I had a conversation this afternoon with the attorney representing Mr. Lehman, who is making this request. She is not able to attend tonight due to a prior commitment, but will be available for questions in the future should we have that. Mr. Sass.
Well, I was just going to address that because I knew she wasn't going to be able to be here. And simply indicate that this is the final step in the process of this annexation. This was before council in the first step, before I went back to county commissioners. This is just the final step of actually accepting this property into the city that we've already consented to the annexation.
Any questions from the committee?
I'll make a motion.
Motion by Parker,
Second.
seconded by Bob. Any questions from the committee? Any questions from the audience? Seeing none, all those in favor of passing this on to council signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. That'll pass with a vote of 5-0. Thank you, Mr. Sasser. Up next, consider ordinance number 21-20, an ordinance changing the zoning classification of certain real property generally described as multiple parcels located on West Main Street, City of Newark, Licking County, Ohio, from that of GC General Commercial, LC Limited Commercial, LI Limited Industrial, and RH Single Family Residence High Density Districts to DC Downtown Zoning District, zoning code of the City of Newark, Ohio. Mr. Rhodes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As always, I just ask that you pass this on to planning commission and come back with an opinion to council. Motion.
Motion by Bub,
Second.
second by Harris. Just for curiosity's sake, can you speak to the specifics of the location of this West Main Street?
Yeah, this encompasses what is now known as the workstation and properties across the street down to 11th Street. We're asking to change the zone.
The properties across the street in the houses on
Yes.
West Main, okay. Okay, questions, Mr. Parker?
Mr. Chair, I want to let you know that I'll be abstaining from this vote as I'm involved in the Newark Station project.
Very good.
Mr. Chairman, Director Rose, we've had a few instances this year where there's concern about people getting notified for when we've had some zoning changes for the gas station and whatnot. And so I'm curious about, with us having multiple properties going into the zoning district, what's the notification process when it does go to the planning commission notifying residents?
I defer to the law director on that. Good question.
Most of the properties that are involved in this, most of the properties that are involved in this rezoning are parties to the application, either themselves or through their representatives. So they're all in agreement with this rezoning. There are others that would abut to those properties that are not part of the rezoning. And the notification there is by regular mail to anyone within 300 feet of the rezoning.
And just to cut this off at the chase, you're going to be notifying property owners that this, and then property owners have the responsibility, should they see fit, to notify the property residents.
I don't know.
Unless the two of the same.
They have no, if it's a rental property, the notification goes to the property owner. What the property owner does with that notification is up to the property owner. But if it's a rental unit, they want to advise the tenant, but the properties that are being rezoned or the applicant is aware of as an agreement with those. But abutting properties that aren't being rezoned, they'll receive notice also, but only within 300 feet of the property that's part of the application.
Any other questions? Mr. Lang.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to make a further comment to that, under the new policy that we implemented with respect to the Facebook page, our clerk Janine will be posting everything to the Facebook page. So recommend, Mr. Blake, you could post to your Facebook page to further share with your constituents if there's some concern there, but that would help get the message out as well.
And just as a clarification also with regard to that notice, so we'll come back here to council in 2 weeks for first reading. It then goes to planning commission. There's a public hearing at planning commission, which is published in the newspaper as well as I assume that it will be on the Facebook page as well. Then when it comes back from planning commission, there's another public hearing on this issue, so another opportunity for citizen input.
And the second public hearing is here in council.
Correct. It constitutes a second reading.
Chairman, Director Sassen, is the 300 feet for this situation the same as it would be if you were just to take a single piece of property? So 300
The
is.
line will be kind of weird because it's, you have to go all around different points of this because it includes more than one property. So it won't just be a straight line. It could be a big bubble.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the committee? Questions from the council, or, I'm sorry, questions from the audience? Seeing none, all those in favor of passing this on to council, signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed, same sign. Abstain.
Aye.
That will move forward with a vote of 4-0-1.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate your time. That will conclude the service committee. Up next will be the safety committee.
Just get a safety skip. She could not attend.
I'm sorry, the safety committee meeting has been canceled. That's will be the street committee. Canceled for this evening.
Postpone.
Actually, everybody's on.
That's all just now. All right, so I would like to call this safety streets committee meeting to order. Those in attendance are Blake, Rath, Labutus, Lang, Marmy, and myself, Fennell. I would like to just start this conversation by stating clearly that this is an opportunity for discussion, and that the final decision in regards to the paving list is in the expert hands of our city engineer and his team of professionals. We also have a special guest who would like to kick us off. We have William Cosser from Scout Troop 65 working towards his Citizen of Community Merit Badge to help him on his way to achieving the rank of Eagle Scout. Mr. Cosser, I would like you to start the meeting, so if you wouldn't mind coming up and to the podium, stating your full name and address and.
All right, my name is Will Kozer. I'm from Scout Troop 65. I live in, Countryside Drive off of that, off of, I think, Twin Pines Trail, 1246. Pine View Trail, sorry. Newark, Ohio, with a zip code of 43059. I'm currently working toward the Citizenship of Community Merit Badge, which is required for an Eagle Scout rank. I need to address the problem in the community for the requirement, and I need to address it to an official in charge. The issue that came to my mind was actually streets, because our streets in our neighborhood actually look pretty kind of rough. And right now, currently, instead of like repaving it, they decided to just fill it with uneven potholes. So right now, there's gravel potholes, maybe occasionally some tar potholes, and it kind of looks like a patchwork design. I just said, like, why can't you just repave the whole road? Because it'd be cheaper, more efficient, and just generally a lot less time consuming than just filling potholes every 6 months. I first became aware of the issue when we moved into our neighborhood in the spring of 2016. The roads weren't in the best shape, but they still looked decent. About 6 months later, larger potholes were forming and cracks were expanding for miles. Instead of repaving it or properly filling it and leveling the potholes, they filled it with leftover gravel and tar from who knows where, and would fill it with, They would press it down but not level it. It would go uneven and it would basically speed bumps in the road. After 5 years of repeating the process, the road now looks very, very rough, and even the sewer systems are now being affected. The location is clogged due to excess gravel because they aren't packed in enough. And the erosion around the sewer grate has increased. And recently, I think about 6 months ago, the sewer grate had to be replaced off of the ground. So my solution for this would be to repave the whole road at once instead of patching it up every couple of months. And another problem with this is that the residential home neighborhoods are actually getting paved more frequently than the mixed home and mixed income neighborhoods. I live in a house, but across the street are condos and apartments. Each of the apartments has 4 renters and approximately about 8 cars that go in and out of the neighborhood per apartment. This means a lot more traffic, more road use and erosion, and more voters that are upset due to the road conditions. Several neighborhoods near ours are residential neighborhoods that have bigger houses, bigger yards, but less vehicles and people. This means less traffic and less road erosion, meaning they're overall, they shouldn't get paved as often. But like about 3 months after I moved into my house, the neighborhood across from us got their road paved. But I think it was 4.5 years later, they got their roads paved again, which kind of seemed unfair for us because we haven't been paved in what looks like at least like 20 years. So as a solution, neighborhood roads should be prioritized over the ones that already look nice. Like, it should be based off of people and the use of road use, the road usage of the neighborhood instead of the looks of the property. So like the neighborhood with lots of people should be paved more than a neighborhood with less people. I would actually suggest, looking into people in the neighborhood instead of repaving roads with higher property value, but fewer residents living in them. There are more voters with mixed income and mixed dwelling neighborhoods than there are single family, high value neighborhoods. It would make more voters upset. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you for your well thought out presentation. All right, with that, I would like to open up for any discussion. Sure. Mr. Martin?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, it was brought to my attention via the Newark Advocate that you and Mr. Blake invited residents from your wards to come and speak on paving, but did not make any of the other council members on the committee or anything aware that we were to invite residents who wanted their roads paved to come and discuss. So therefore, I think this is an unfair presentation that you're having with this committee and just trying to get your ward represented and not the entire city of Newark. As you indicated before, our city engineer, Mr. Moorhead, he uses various techniques and priorities to prioritize the paving of our roads. Any council member is welcome to give input to the city engineer. Some of those, the things that are in the determination has nothing to do with appearance, whether it be, the patch and seal, which is an effective method of repairing our roads. My road in particular, I would not say, ours are all single family houses with at least a half an acre. And, our road has never been paved in the 30 years in the existence of the road itself. So I don't believe that our city engineer discriminates or does anything along those lines. But I also feel that this meeting is called to order basically for you and Mr. Blake to represent your wards, and none of the other wards were aware that they could bring in information or residents in their area in order to have the same discussion. I don't think that is fair. So therefore, I would make a motion that this meeting stand adjourned, and the fact that no one was aware that we were supposed to talk to our constituents and have them come in and discuss this. It was just stated on the agenda that there was a discussion on the anticipating upcoming street paving list.
We have a motion on the floor.
I see our engineer is here, present, and our service director is here as well. The two council members representing the people in the stands are here as well. I think if you guys want to have a private meeting and see if you can bend their ear afterwards, I think that would be appropriate. But I would agree with Mr. Marmy, and I'll second the motion.
Okay, is there any further discussion?
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I would say that we all receive these agendas on Thursdays. And so we're all aware of what committees are occurring for Monday night. And so, just if we were to invite our residents, because we were contacted by them, there's multiple news articles that were written about this topic. And yes, when people called me, when Joe called me, I said, yeah, come to the meeting. There's gonna be a street committee meeting. And when Mr. Cosser and his son, yes, come to the meeting. So each of you, when constituents contacted you, you could have said, come to a meeting, because you knew from Thursday when the agendas went out that this was happening. So proper notice was given. It's my understanding that you as chair have talked to Council President Ellington, and you've talked to our city council parliamentarian, Doug Sasson. The meeting is in order. People want to speak about this topic. They're here to speak about this topic. We have an hour until city council, 50 minutes until city council starts. So I don't see what the harm is in allowing these people to speak for peace. They're here and they want to comment, and they should be allowed to do so. And so I hope that we proceed and use this 50 minutes before council begins to let them say their piece.
Mr. Chairman, point of order. Motion to adjourn is not debatable. So basically, you can state the basis for the motion, but it's not subject to debate.
Okay. All right, so we have a motion and a second on the floor. All those in favor of adjourning streets committee, please say aye. All those opposed, same sign.
Aye.
Weren't you supposed to let the public speak before you vote? Because you guys just got to speak between yourselves, and then you're supposed to give it to the floor before you vote. So, yeah, that would have been nice.
Motion to adjourn is not subject to debate or comment.
Yeah.
That was after the fact that they talked amongst themselves too. It's usually, because I just watched all the proceedings before this, and it was always before they vote, they talk up there, any questions or answers, the public, any questions or answers, and that's when you gave them the information to speak. Like to say, well, you're not allowed to adjourn unless they vote on it. And then they just voted on it without, again, throwing it back to the public. I just wanted to let you know, Mr. Marmy, we weren't trying to throw anyone specifically under the bus, or Brian Moorhead, or anyone at all. It was just, he's been working on this since February, so this wasn't like a particular, like, we're picking on anybody.
And
It was just our neighborhood, and that was it. This wasn't
I
like,
do appreciate
yeah,
that.
it
I
wasn't an
think
attack.
that
on
the,
anyone.
that your presentation doesn't really have anything to do with, I think, the
Okay.
conversation that we're having at this particular moment, so please do not take that in any way.
Okay.
Personally, and I think it was my error to allow for conversation, is that correct? So there should not have been conversation happening after the motion in the second was made amongst council members. So yeah, that's why our parliamentarians kicked in and said, just a minute.
Okay, understand. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so sorry, I missed the vote. We had, can you just raise your hands for me for those to adjourn? 3-3. Okay. Is it?
Motion fails.
Motion fails, we'll
Okay.
continue.
Motion fails. All right, so is there any other discussion? Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Kozer, Countryside is up in the 5th Ward, so I appreciate you coming.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
And I've actually received, that's actually why I couldn't support the motion to adjourn. I did want to address your comments. I have received a couple of folks who have reached out, and the typical way that we do this is, when folks reach out, they email us, they call us, and we get with the city engineer to try to, make requests or have him take a second look. And Mr. Moorhead keeps a list of, all the different roads that he's working on, tries to prioritize, and he can certainly speak to that better than I. And so when we make requests, we can't always, get everything we want on the list, right? There's there's more paving out there than we can do, even if we had the money. I think, the hope this year is we can use the 3 million that we have. But I think, anticipate some of that going into next year. But Countryside is definitely an area that I think needs to be repaved. So I appreciate you coming. I think what they do in the meantime is it's patchwork job, you can't repave every street every year. So they do have to fill those potholes with some different materials to try to patch them. And I think that's what's, been going on Countryside. So hopefully, but I don't know if it'll get on the next list, or maybe the one after that, we can get to Countryside. And I don't know, Mr. Moorhead wants to speak to I don't know if you know where Countryside is on that list, or if that's anything you're prepared to speak to at all.
It needs paved.
He's usually aware, when we get in touch with him, he's usually more aware than we are. Yep, I know it because he drives all the streets and he looks up and down. So I really appreciate you coming up with the conversation.
Thank you. I find it interesting this year that all of a sudden street paving is a big issue in a couple wards. Last year, no one said anything, and the paving got done. Here's a list of the paving since 2015. You go through this list, there's streets in every ward every year. That's prioritized on here. So no one's discriminating against any wards. So every ward gets certain streets. This is last year. Last year in the 7th ward, 9 streets got paved. That's 5,330 feet of paving got done in that ward. So 7th ward, you're not going to get streets paved every year. 1st ward got 22 streets paved last year, 15,260 feet of paving. 2nd ward, 7 streets, 5,285. I think the paper, if I remember the article right, they were saying 5th ward's getting most of the paving. Well, if you look at this list last year, 3rd and 4th ward got most of the paving too. So every year, you're going to have some wards get more, some get less. And the engineer knows the streets that needs to be paved every year. He's got on this list this year a couple subdivisions that were built in the early 90s, haven't been paid for 30 years. They're going to get paid for the first time. There'll be another 30 years probably before they get paid, and then half of the wards will get done before them subdivisions will get paved again. So I really don't understand why we're making a big issue about paving this year. People's paving is going to get done. If your street needs to be paved, call Brian Moorhead, he'll come out and look. If you think your street's bad, get a hold of the paving list, drive to all these streets and look at their streets and compare your street to theirs. If it's worse, I'm sure he can do something about that. I don't understand. Well, I understand why we're having this discussion this year. I understand. I know the answer. But I think this is ridiculous, talking about this tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, I also, I do hear a lot of concerns from my constituents. They want the road paved. And I literally just pick up the phone as their representative and I call Brian Moorhead and I ask him, where are we at on this? How bad are some of the other roads? And he is going to be upfront and say, look, it's not nearly as bad as this one, this one, this one, and this one. And he will tell me that. And I can share that information. And I don't try to bombard him with every single one. I do sometimes go in with 3 of them maybe, or 4 of them that I feel are the worst. Because when I get these complaints, I go out and I look at them. And I make sure. And I can tell you, my neighbors complain because they're like, well, aren't you on council? Why isn't our road paved? I said, because it's functional still. It may not look pretty because it's got patch and seal. It's got a lot of patch and seal. and it's got cracks and there's grass growing up. So every once in a while, we gotta do some fixing there. It doesn't look pretty, but it's very, very functional. Now, the thoroughfares, that's the roads, and like the young gentleman said, the people who drive on the roads the most, those are the roads that need the most repair, because they are traveled on a lot more. And so I trust the city engineer. I communicate to the city engineer. He communicates very effectively and very honestly back to me. And he also indicates that sometimes, even when we have the money, the companies can't do it. They can't do it all in a given year. So we have to roll it over to a next year. So there's a lot of different things that go into play. It's an administrative function on the executive side of the branch. And the legislators, all we do as legislators is we communicate to the administration for our constituents. And that's what we do. And that's what I have done for years. And I appreciate all the folks that have come to me with their concerns. And there have been a few roads that I had not traveled on. I didn't realize how bad they were until someone brought them to our attention. Okay, so I do appreciate everybody coming in here. I just also appreciate the work that our engineering department does on this and the hard work that they do. And that he listens to the council members that come to him with their constituents' concerns. So I am greatly appreciative of that. Thank you very much.
Mr. Rath and then Mr. Blake.
Thank you.
And then I'll. be opening up.
I will say that I take a little bit of a different approach. Every spring I go out and I drive every road in the 3rd Ward. And I send a list to Brian of the roads that I want paved. And I prioritize that list. I go primary, secondary, tertiary. Primary is the ones that obviously need paved like right now, right away. And I will say that he has paved every single road that I've asked him to pave. He's been very good about that. Sometimes it's been a year or 2 or 3 or 4 after I've asked him to pave it. But eventually he gets around to it. And it's just a matter of prioritizing. Now, obviously, my list is never going to be completed because I keep adding to the list every spring. I keep adding to that list every year. But Brian, actually, could I ask you a few questions? Would you mind? Sure. You probably have to come up with a microphone. It's stage. I apologize for that. A few years ago, I don't remember how many it was that you do. I'm sure you do. But didn't we hire a company to do a study of all of our roads?
Yeah.
About 10 years ago.
It's been about 10 years ago now.
And they did some type of sonographic study, mapped out all of our roads.
They did an evaluation of all the pavement in the city, all the streets. And their evaluation was that we should be spending, and this was 10 years ago, that we should be spending about $2.2 million a year on our annual resurfacing to be able to keep up with the amount of pavement that we've got, the number of streets that we've got.
Was that to keep up or to catch up to previous shortfall?
That was to keep up.
Okay, 2.5 million,
2.2.
2.2.
Right, because I believe what the number was back then. And we needed to have that number, going forward. It would allow a little bit of catch up, but they were also anticipating costs going up and additional streets coming online. So their number that they came up with was about $2.2 million.
Okay.
Since then, we have never.
We have an endless budget. Right?
We have never,
do that, right?
yeah, right. We have never approached that number. And this is the first year that we have even been at that number. So.
Okay. The information that you got from that study, are you still making decisions based on that?
No.
Or is that too
not really.
obsolete?
It's obsolete at this point.
Okay. So what are you basing your decisions on?
I go out and I drive each street. So, I drive all the streets. I look at, I have last year's list that didn't get funded. We carry those over to this year. And some streets fall apart even worse over the winter. But I go out and I look at all those streets and then I take in any of the, requests or the complaints that we get. We get calls in the office,
folks. We never make any promises because we don't know what our budget's gonna be, but we guarantee that we'll go out and take a look and put them on the list for consideration. So that's what we do.
No, I know I've asked you to pave some roads before that I've pretty much been yelling and screaming about, but these are really bad.
Mhm.
And they haven't. At least not that year that I asked.
Right.
So when you look at a road, and I'm saying this road is really bad,
Mhm.
and I've got roads that are bad, I've got roads that are okay, I've got new roads.
Yep.
When I say a road's really bad, I try to be fairly conservative. I try not to yell and scream and say, this is really bad, unless it's really bad.
Right.
And yet you still don't, what makes a road really bad versus pavable? How do you make that determination?
Well, I mean, I look at the condition of the roads, you know, the potholes, the amount of patching we're doing, the cracking, the dips, and then I also take into account other things that are going on, like the gas company has been in the mode of replacing services and replacing lines in a lot of different neighborhoods. So if the gas company is going to be coming in and cutting the pavement and replacing services, replacing gas lines in a neighborhood, I wait till after they're done. Of course, I don't want to pave the street and then have the gas company or, you know, any of the other utilities come in and tear that up. So consequently, we meet with them annually and we figure out what lists they have. And that all goes into the prioritization. I mean, right now, they have a project down around the Orchard Street area. So I'm not paving any of those streets in that neighborhood because they're gonna be cutting them up, replacing gas lines, replacing services. So when they're done, then we'll bring those back onto the list and we'll evaluate at that point.
When they come back on the list, you'll be evaluating them, so they may not end up at the bottom of the list, they may end up at the top of the list, just depending on what kind of condition they're in.
Correct.
Doesn't necessarily mean they lose their spot. in the
No,
list.
no,
They still prioritize, which changes every year.
it changes. A lot of them change every winter. Yeah.
Sure. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I first want to say that, you know, when I first got on council, I believe it was a year after, maybe 2 years after, we had a street levy that was put out. And it was Brian and David Rhodes, and I know myself was there. And streets has been it's always, I mean, it's one of the most important functions of city government is to make sure that our residents have paved and maintained streets. And so to say that it's only happened within this year, I mean, I worked with Brian and others on that levy campaign, and advocating for good streets has been my whole career up here, sitting in the seat. And so, you know, and I remember the study that Brian just referred to, because that's what he used in those presentations. I mean, I think you had a PowerPoint presentation that was like 30 slides or something. So talking about all the different conditions of the streets and what each terms meant. And, you know, Mr. Rath mentioned the tiered street terms, and you went through all that, just trying to convince people that we need more money, more dollars for paving, for the annual paving program that happens in our city. And that was, you know, 6-7 years ago when we had that street levy committee. So, you know, streets are always a priority for us. And you have to admit that, you know, out of the 11 council members that sit up here, each of us hold our roles differently. Each of us decide to communicate differently with our constituents and differently with administration. And for me, I like my constituents to know that, hey, if you have a concern, here's your opportunity to voice your concern. Here's your opportunity to come down, and you're not just going to tell me where I can relay it on, but you can speak for yourself. Because you live down in the South End, they like to speak for themselves. You know, that's how it is, and that's how it's always been. And you know, people are here even tonight, and I hope some of them will come up to the podium and share their stories. But people like to speak for themselves, and they like their voice to be put on the record. And that only happens in a public meeting. And that, you know, this is going to be minutes are going to be developed after this meeting. So that's where the concern is like, hey, you know, this such and such a day, I went downtown to City Hall and I spoke to City Council. I told them that this is my concern, this is what's happening. And so some of you are comfortable with just sharing, you know, outside information, but I like for things to be on the record, for there's something that we could point back to. And I even remember a year ago, when streets committee meeting was called, and where Brian brought information about when each of the streets were last paved. He provided that information, and that was valuable information. So the discussion on streets is an annual thing, not just a once a time situation. I do want to give some thank yous because it's, you know, since even the first article, and we're in a very unique situation this year, and that's something to be celebrated. I mean, to receive these additional dollars where we do have a second round of paving, that is a blessing. So, you know, for us to be able to, I mean, typically we would have just got that first initial round of paving that we wouldn't even hear about it until next year. But these dollars came in, and, you know, now here we are discussing about where are we going to spend these dollars. So that's a blessing. That's a great thing. But I've been contacted, and, you know, Harris Avenue, Joe Walsh is here. You know, his wife calls me quite frequently, but to talk about Harris Avenue. But it wasn't just Kay talking about Harris Avenue. It was also Michelle Snedden. She spoke about Harris Avenue. Idlewild, Angie Ruffy and Ruth Hallwall, they both talked about Idlewild Avenue, contacted me. Franklin Avenue, Jerry Gard and Matt Gayhart talked about Franklin Avenue. Down on South 6th Street, Mike Monroe talked about his street. Melissa Lynn talked about Fleet Avenue. Buckeye Avenue, Mary Rhodes contacted me and wanted to talk about Buckeye Avenue paving. South 24th Street, Angie Ruffy had talked about South 24th Street. East Harrison Avenue, that was another one mentioned by Melissa Lynn. Worley Avenue was mentioned by Nancy Miller. And Morgan Avenue was mentioned by Deb Hambrick. And so these are streets that people have been reading the newspaper, they've been reading about what's going on here at City Hall, and they wanted to communicate. And so this is just purely an opportunity for them to be able to express their concerns and to come down and make their voices heard. And if anything else, public input is important because it builds trust. Because if we have any opportunity in the future where we're going to have to go to our citizens and ask for those street levy dollars, then they're going to say, well, what did you do when I came down to City Hall? And I want to be able to say, well, this is what we've done. Building that community trust, building that, you know, that relationship between us here at City Hall and our neighbors and residents. And so I value the opportunity for residents to come and speak to us. And it's a part of our duties, in my opinion, is to be able to listen to people about their concerns, to listen about the worries and the troubles that they're going through living here in our city. And streets is a huge part of that. So, so thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I hope that some of the residents will be able to speak their piece tonight. Thank you.
Sean. Can I say something?
Yes.
I don't think anyone's disputing, Jeremy, that these streets are bad. No one's arguing that. But my point is, not every street's going to get paved every year in every ward. Okay, and we only have so much money. Okay, Brian knows these streets are not equal, but there's other streets that are worse in other wards than the streets that you just named. I mean, but here's the other thing you got to talk about too. Talk about the positive things that's been done. Your 4th Street's going to look amazing. They've got 4th Street paved. All these streets that got paved last year, and then this list from 2015, every streets that's been paved in the 2nd ward. Okay, there's been a lot of streets paved. So it's just not. I don't want people to say it's just the 2nd and the 7th ward that the streets are bad. It's all over the city, and everybody pays taxes. We only have so much money to pave every year. And eventually everybody's street's going to get paved. But Brian, he does a great job. You guys ought to be in Brian's shoes and try to make a list and go through it. So I just don't want people to think that it's all the 2nd and 7th ward that their streets are bad. There are bad streets everywhere. And the city is doing what they can to get everybody's street paved when they can do it. Thanks.
Oh, no.
Okay.
No.
Hi, my name is Rebecca, and I reside at 79 Grant Street. And I'm not just here about street paving. I have an island on my property. Now, I have a question. Is this gentleman, the engineer here, is his office at the water department? Who's the gentleman at the water department? Whose office is at the water department?
Which gentleman?
He's an engineer and he's supposed to be the one dealing with my island, but I'm not sure he knows how to use a telephone because I've never received a call back in a few years. Initially, when I moved onto the property, I got calls back, but now I don't. I have pictures. When it rains heavy, I have an island and it's not a very valuable island as in, sun and everything. It's got a telephone pole and a trash can. Now, I was told it was the result of a culvert, and I explained several times it wasn't a culvert, but I suppose that women don't know a lot about culverts. So they came out and looked at it several years ago, about 5 years ago, and sure enough, it wasn't a culvert. But then no one ever calls me back. So if we can't come here and speak in a public forum, then how can we communicate? And I'm thrilled, Mr. Marmy, that people call you back who work for the city, but it might be because you're a councilman. As far as the streets go, there's an alley on the side of my property. And several times I bought bags of that black stuff to put in it. And every year or two, they come down and they dump a shovel in each hole. And I ask them about the biggest holes by where I park. And they always tell me, oh no, it's my responsibility. But I keep up on my taxes. I bought my house in a redevelopment area because I thought you wanted to attract respectable people here. And I consider myself a semi-respectable person. I don't feel that I'm getting value received for my money or the energy that I making to make my home nice. And I made a lot of improvements since I bought it. Did not even have drywall in the ceiling when I bought it. The electric was messed up. But anyways, I don't know how to get communication from people at the city, not during normal business hours. They don't return calls. And when they do, I'm not allowed calls at work. And frankly, I wish that I had more faith in people that are sitting in your seats, but other than Jeremy, who is my councilman, I don't get a lot of communication. I don't subscribe to TV. I don't subscribe to the newspaper. And I know that politicians don't like to commit. How many times have I heard the words, we can't promise in this room? We can't promise this and we can't promise that. You gotta stand for something. You're gonna fall for anything, Stand for something. Tell us what you're gonna do this year. Tell us what you're gonna do next year. I've lived there 6 years. It's never been paved. I get the same excuses. I go out and talk to the people doing it and they're just contractors, which means they're representing the city. And it does not reflect good upon the city to conduct yourself in this manner. If you conduct yourself in a respectful, ethical, communicative manner, and of course, if you don't know how to use a phone, then whoever works there at the water department, because I've been down there, and they always tell me they'll communicate, and my water bill's always paid on time, and my taxes are always paid on time, but nothing. So I like my island address, and I would like the street paved. Grant Street connects 79 to Williams, the whole neighborhood. Ambulances, fire trucks, people who are going to the mountain park, and to continue on 79 if there's an accident, and other things. And south to get back to Main Street, which is, of course, where the hospital is. So we do get quite a bit of traffic on there, but no communication. So I think it's great to be a council person, excuse me, because you get communicated with.
Was that John Trujillo that you spoke to?
Yes, that's
That's
exactly.
stormwater. That is not the water department. He has left, and what's the name of the new gentleman?
Lindsey Bright.
Lindsey Bright. Lindsey Bright is the new person in that position. And Mr. Trujillo is no longer in that department here. So
Well, since they pick up the phone when you call, would you be willing to call them and ask them to give me a call? Because I'd love to speak with them.
sure. Mr. Chair.
Ms. Eaton.
If I'm, so the way that I typically work on, when I get issues that people presented to me, I start emailing Brian, or I start emailing the right people. I'm not emailing them on my own behalf, but they answer my calls, not just because I'm a councilman, but also because if they don't respond, I'm gonna follow up and I'm gonna be persistent. So, you know, I think I struggle, you're here addressing Councilman Marmy when your councilman's sitting right there and he should be the one following up. I mean, that's what if your issue was in my ward, I would be emailing Brian or be emailing Roger at the water department. And if it wasn't taken care of in, you know, a reasonable time, I'd be following up and staying on them. And I'm not necessarily saying he's not doing that, but to come here and then, you know, Mr. Marmy is in the 6th ward, it's the other area of town. He's got folks up in the 6th ward that are contacting him about things, and that's what he's following up with. You know, I think we have a ward system in this city for a reason, right? We each have an area of town that we focus on, and then we also have the at-large councilmen that, you know, help out as well. But each of us, I think, is responsible for being persistent and being the advocates for the folks in our ward. So if something needs to be followed up on, that's where your councilman really should be fighting for you and should be making those calls and calling you back. And with that, I'm gonna make a motion to adjourn, because I think I agree with Councilman Marmy at this point.
I'm sorry it's been so uncomfortable for you to listen to my truth, but I'm just pretty frustrated at no.
I'll be able to, after this meeting, I'll get your number, I'll follow up with you.
I appreciate
Okay,
it.
thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Clarification, we spoke about 4:55 this afternoon, is that correct?
Yes, but I
So-
contacted Mr. Trujillo, however you say
Right,
it.
but
For
as
6
far
years.
as me getting involved, it was just today when I heard about these concerns.
That is correct, but
So
I
I just
assume-
wanted to clarify which.
I don't understand why it's my job to make sure someone else does their job. We're getting paid a heck of a lot more than I am. I've been with my job 10 years and I would never expect someone to be responsible for making me do my job. I'm a big girl now. Thank you for your time.
So we do have a motion on the floor. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay. All those in favor of adjourning, say aye. All those opposed?
Aye.
This meeting of the Streets Committee meeting is adjourned, and full council is at 7. If you have else, if